Right, well, ANC President Cyril Ramaphosa says that the governing party and its leaders who are in government must intensify efforts to root out corruption. In a letter to all party members, the president called for an immediate end to corruption in the party ranks, government and society as a whole. Ramaphosa says every South African must be assertive in the fight against corruption. ANC members are called on to support progressive organizations in their stand against corruption. With regards to tender processes, Ramaphosa says an open tender process must be adopted in certain areas and the information of people or entities tendering for contracts must be made public, as well as a vetting process. A detailed explanation of the pricing for such tenders must also be released to the public. He also called for an anti-corruption hotline to be set up, as well as an online service for the public to report on corrupt practices. In this regard, Ramaphosa also says the state must fast-track the establishment of an independent multi-disciplinary law enforcement agency to deal with white-collar crime, organised crime and corruption. All right, let's take this conversation further. We're joined now by our foreign editor, Sophie Mokoena, who has covered the COVID-19 pandemic developments on the continent and similar corruption issues internationally, as well as our politics editor, Mzwandile Mbeje, who has been monitoring things locally. A very good afternoon to you, Mzwai. And Sophie, I'm going to begin with you, Mzwai. The ANC president, Cyril Ramaphosa, today talking about the issue of corruption, which has been quite a big issue in South Africa as a whole. Is this letter by the president a signal of perhaps something significant about to happen? I mean, I really read it as the same sort of rhetoric that we've been hearing from people condemning the corruption within the ANC. What did you make really of the tone of this letter?
Well, very good afternoon to you, Flo, and the viewers. It's quite interesting to see a letter from the president of the ANC writing to the members of the ANC. In fact, you'd realize that in the past few weeks or even months, the ANC has been getting a battering because of what it's been doing. So the image really has been seriously dented because all these corruption allegations are being leveled at the governing party. And if you've been listening to the mood of the people across the country, and you could see that, you could sense that there is a loss of confidence. And remember, this is the party, Flo, which claims to be the leader of society. If the leader of society is the one really that is going astray, so clearly it means going forward, people are not going to entrust that confidence in the party. I think the reason why the president of the ANC in this instance decided to speak to the members of the ANC, because here, this is the party which is running the country nationally and in 8 of the provinces. So when you talk about issues of corruption, you are basically talking about the very party. And you can't, as the leader of the party, just stand aside and look. You have to do something. Yes, the letter is quite strong. Yes, the letter seems to be very purposeful in its tone. But the proof, Flo, will be what is going to be done going forward.
Ma'am Sophie, let me bring you in here. Let's bring in our foreign editor, Sophie Mokoena, at this point. It does seem to be a little bit embarrassing that we have our president having to write to members of his parties about the issue of corruption. No doubt corruption, we see it in many countries. But of course, the international community has caught wind of the fact that we're grappling with corrupt activities linked to supplies meant for COVID-19. The WHO also talking about this issue. How will we be perceived really as a country when the international community has now gotten wind of this and really on the continent where, we've been seen or perceived as having much respect on the continent? What does this mean for South Africa really as a whole and the government in terms of struggling to deal with corruption within the party that is ruling the country?
There was optimism and hope when President Ramaphosa this year became the chair of the African Union that South Africa will lead by example in terms of what needs to be done on the continent. We know there are challenges on the continent. South Africa being the last country to be liberated, the expectation was that we have learned lessons from other countries that have traveled this road, particularly on issues of respect for human rights, respect for democracy, but also putting people first and ensuring that whoever is a leader is committed to changing lives of the ordinary people that he leads. And therefore, there was hope that South Africa will indeed lead the way. And come COVID-19, now South Africa is found wanting at a very, very critical time. The strange thing is that the president is doing very well on the continent in rallying and mobilizing resources for the continent to deal with this pandemic. All the time, there are meetings of the Assembly of Heads of State to take stock of what is happening, what needs to be done. And when you look at how Africa has performed, when you look at the impact of COVID-19 in terms of infections and the death and the recovery, that is why people are even asking why Africa is not affected the way many people thought it would be. People thought that it was going to be a genocide. Everybody was just going to die on the continent because this is a dark continent, a continent of people who can't think.
Yeah.
But the leadership was able to come together to deal with this issue. As we speak, Strike Masiwa, a businessman from Zimbabwe, has been appointed by the very same President Ramaphosa to lobby countries and resources, and they've set up a purpose vehicle where Africa is buying these PPE in bulk so that everyone has got it. Now, when it comes to these respective countries, unfortunately now we find these problems. Therefore, people are seeing these stories. These stories are trending international. And of course, now questions are being raised in terms of what kind of South Africa we have currently that doesn't want to deal or stop the tendencies of corruption, because the state capture, the establishment of the state capture did put South Africa on the spotlight because it had links with multinational companies and international world. And therefore now we are here. And the president, when he went to Nazareth to look at the preparations in terms of the hospital, I remember him very well. He said, I don't want to see another commission. Here we are. Clearly, we might have another commission. Where did we go wrong? Did Treasury do its work? Did the respective ministers do the oversight work? They cannot, the ministers and the NECs, blame the technocrats. The technocrats, yes, they take decisions, who gets what and what, but we know behind the scenes, politicians tend to tell technocrats what to do. And unfortunately, there are no paper trails. That is why now technocrats are exposed now. They have to answer now. And it's no surprise that some are saying, no, so-and-so said, I must do this. And it will be very difficult to prove that. Now, unfortunately, here we are. And the president now is trying to say, let's go back to the drawing board. But ANC had ample time to deal with this issue, starting with their conference, the General Council in Port Elizabeth some years ago, where they started to identify these foreign tendencies, going to Stellenbosch conference, where those resolutions were adopted in terms of using the eye of the needle to address the problems of the ANC, went to Pretoria, the NGC, where things went horribly wrong because everything was reversed. And then Polokwane, of course, lots of things happened. And here we are. So the ANC has to go back to the drawing board. The Nazareth conference resolutions are very, very clear on corruption. One, take people to integrity committee. Secondly, suspend people who fail to really motivate why the steps shouldn't be taken, who are facing investigation and prosecutorial procedures. And then the other important one, publicly disassociate itself, the ANC, from anyone who is, whether it's a business donor, a supporter, or a member who is accused of corruption. Therefore, the president, what he did with the letter is to just talk about let's implement the NASREC resolution, because really we are now found wanting both local and international. And you had the response of the WHO director, Tedros, saying stealing or corruption in the PPE procurement tantamounts to murder. Others are saying genocide.
I'd like to pick up actually from where you left off with regards to those within the ANC that are suspected of being involved in corrupt activities. Let me bring you in, please, Mzwandile. Is the president indeed then tackling this issue of corruption? I mean, just this week we saw, and I'm picking up really from where Sophie left off, just this week we saw Mzwandile Gumede being brought in back to the ANC in KZN in a big position yet again. And as Sophie is mentioning, the fact that these are people that are facing investigation, some of these people have been suspended. And here, a clear example, as we have this conversation, we saw it happening this week. So when we say that the issue of corruption needs to be tackled, but then we see names like Mzwandile Gumede popping up yet again in the ANC in KZN, it does kind of say that maybe the ANC might not be as serious as they want us to believe in terms of wanting to tackle corruption. And of course, we heard one of the ANC leadership members in KZN saying that, well, people are not guilty until it is proven so. But as Sophie did mention, these people are facing, of course, investigations, and the ANC should indeed be wanting to disassociate themselves with anyone really who's seen or perceived to be corrupt. So again, my question, is the issue of corruption within the ANC really being taken seriously?
Well, Flo, I think the biggest problem really that the ANC finds itself facing right now is the issue of mixed messaging. In the midst of mixed messaging, really, what to believe. You, on one hand, are telling us that you are serious about fighting corruption, you are serious about cleaning the road. But at the same time, so some of your actions point to a situation where actually you are seen to be turning a blind eye. Yes, we accept that people are innocent until proven otherwise. But if there are allegations that have been leveled at certain individuals, the example that you have made of Mzwandile Gumede, she is going through a court process. Why was it not necessary for the ANC to wait for that process to conclude before they take a decision? Because now, in the next weeks or few months, so people will see her go to court. But then we'll say a few weeks ago, this person was reinstated to be an MPL. So the problem really that the president needs to make very clear in terms of clarifying is the issue of mixed messaging. When he came to this position, he spoke very strongly on fighting corruption. He spoke very strongly on making sure that things are done the right way. But here we are, as my colleague had said earlier, here we are, we're seeing the really serious allegations of corruption mushrooming everywhere in every province. So which then tells you that the problem is deeper than meets the eye. So other than perhaps writing a letter, well, it's good, it's a good start, but I think we need, and South Africans need to see actions really being taken. So let's see people account for their actions, because it will not help to then talk about certain things, but there are no actions. So the ANC will have to deal with the issue of mixed messaging.
All right. Sophie, the president, of course, today in this letter was speaking in his capacity as president of the ANC. But I really want to, bring this a little bit more about the continent in terms of the president's role as the AU chair. I mean, what does it really mean for his position in the AU? I mean, it's so easy if he's trying to, negotiate or peace terms, for example, in in countries within the continent for members of those, for people in those countries to say, well, look, you need to fix your own house first. You can't be telling us really what to do, and you can't be guiding us when you're facing such issues within your own political country, political party, never mind your own country. How are you able to tell us how to move forward within our own countries? Does this not put him in quite an embarrassing position in terms of being a leader within the AU?
I earlier on indicated that you have to lead by example when you lead any multilateral organization on behalf of the country, because he is not leading AU in his personal capacity. He is leading the AU on behalf of South Africa and on behalf of South Africans. Therefore, whatever he does, it is South Africa. It speaks to the type of a country we are. When he came in, when he was talking about, and when you look at the foreign policy and the changes that he brought in terms of leadership in that position, appointing Dr. Naledi Pandor, the message was clear. We are not going to do things the same way. We want to reposition ourselves back where we were previously on international arena. And that is why they even spoke about how they are going to relook at decisions and positions they take on issues of human rights violations, on issues of corruption, on issues of multilateralism, on issues of gender-based violence. And South Africa now is expected to lead by example when the world is found wanting on those issues. Now, at the AU again, the president, when he took over, he promised to deal with issues such as gender-based violence, corruption on the continent, but also human rights. And therefore, people expect him to do just that. And therefore, if you can't do it in your country, it's a terrible PR for you, because you then have to go and address these multilateral organizations and give leadership and represent the continent, while in your backyard there are questions. So I think where he is, he finds himself in a very, very, very difficult position. And the problem here is that the ANC went to Nazareth, they adopted resolutions. It's not a general council where you still have to take this resolution to a proper conference for adoption. These resolutions were adopted. Take people to integrity committee. Ask people to recuse themselves. Three, ensure the most important one that we normally don't look at, a resolution taken here at Nazareth by all ANC members. No one questioned that resolution. What they directed the deployees in cabinet, I'm talking about ministers, to particularly finance, police and justice, to go and strengthen the capacity in those departments, so that they are able to deal with issue of corruption. In other words, Treasury must be vigilant at all times, and Treasury must never waver from insisting on following of procedures as per PFMA on issues of tender and administration in general. The police must do its work, investigate, present the docket to the NPA. NPA must look at the docket. If there's a case, don't even hesitate. Continue with the case. If there's no case, don't keep allegations hanging. Say there's no case. Therefore, Justice Department ensure that the justice system has got capacity to deal with these cases quickly. And therefore, these are the things that ANC must remember, that they made that commitment. They can't come today and question when some of its members are taking hardline on corruption to say, but so-and-so did that, so-and-so did that, why so-and-so. These are resolutions. They are on paper. You can Google. They are there for everyone to see. So people just want action, so that when the president go out there, he is able to speak with authority, with respect, but also he's able to give direction on the continent. Because we have a similar case in Kenya, where there are allegations of corruption on PPE. We saw the doctors striking. And like Tedros has said, this is murder, because these frontline workers get affected, they get ill, some of them have died, and they infect the people that they are supposed to help, because it's not only people with COVID-19 who go to hospitals. Therefore, you are just killing people. You are killing people. And then the same with Zimbabwe. The Minister of Health has been fired because of corruption. Therefore, I think the continent, for me, it's about the continent. It can't be business as usual when dealing with issues of corruption.
All right, Mzwandile, let me close the conversation with you then. We see where, of course, Sophie is going with this conversation. So let me take it to you now in terms of what next for President Cyril Ramaphosa in his capacity as ANC president. All right, so the letter's been sent, now what?
Well, he's got a lot in his hands, Flo. The issue really that he has to battle with now is that the party that he is leading, the party that he has written to, is riddled with factionalism. So as much as some of what he is saying, many people will agree with it, but the fact that so-and-so said it, so will make it very difficult. I think what he needs to do now, going forward, he needs to, as Sophie had indicated earlier, they need to put those resolutions into action, because the ANC has got everything beautifully written on paper. The question is implementation. So if you have decided that if you are accused of corruption, you have to stand aside, simply do that. I think the president will need to lead from the front, will need to get his collective with, will need to get all his sides to say, if we have decided on a decision, so we must stick to that decision. Because it doesn't help that will be hard on a particular member, because immediately they will say, well, he's picking and choosing depending on who the factions belong to. So they will need to implement the resolutions that are already there, and of course they must do it to everyone regardless of which faction he or she belongs to.
All right, let's wrap it up there. Mzwandile, Mbeje, Sophie Mokoena, thank you very much for giving your time this afternoon as we analyze really that letter by the president and also issues on the continent at large. Appreciate you giving us your time here on SA Today. That's Mzwandile Mbeje, a political editor, Sophie Mokoena, our foreign editor at SABC. Thank you very much.